Because we were trying to see, okay, what is the definition of meditation? People were basically saying, control your thoughts, stop your thoughts. And then sometimes it's like some more broad thing of like, understand the concept of the self or some sort of thing that's still not clear what is happening here and what is the point.
The goal is to do nothing and just be.
Right. And it's like, that's very vague. We first started learning about meditation probably when I was around 8 years old. And I remember I just thought, okay, you're trying to control your thoughts. You're trying to like have as little thoughts as possible. Mm-hmm. So what I would do is I would just count numbers in my head, or I would just try to think the color black and just try to see black and only black. And then I would just be lying in my bed just like.
Not only, you got really into it. Like, we've got a picture of you.
I did, yeah. Like, I wrote a project about beginning meditation for younger people, which was around that time, and there's a picture of just me going like, and I think that this kind of relates to, this is the broader notion that people have about meditation, which is like controlling your thoughts and like
reducing your thoughts
or completely stopping your thoughts, and that's the most amazing thing when you don't have any thoughts.
That's the goal to strive for, is
right.
No thoughts.
Right.
And then I think the one assumption that's kind of based on is like thoughts are like, crowding your head.
Right.
And it's there, and they cause negative emotions a lot of the time.
Right.
Which sometimes happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes doesn't.
But I think it's dangerous to have an overly simplified optimization function without understanding what is the goal here, right? Because if you're just thinking, okay, let me try to reduce thoughts, and that's the only thing you're concerned about, without first kind of like defining meditation, because we were trying to see, okay, what is the definition of meditation? And basically we were watching a lot of videos and things where people were basically saying, control your thoughts, stop your thoughts, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's like some more broad thing of like, understand the concept of the self or some like sort of thing that's still kind of like, okay, this is still confusing. This is not clear what is happening here,
it's
and
like,
what is the point.
The goal is to do nothing and just be.
Right. And it's like, that's very vague.
Yeah.
Right? So how do I know if I'm just being opposed to not being? So it's very confusing. And I think that part of it is also understanding that it's like there are certain kind of symptoms, which we talked about in our flow podcast, is that a lot of people will be like, when you're in flow, it'll like, it's the same thing with meditation, decreased anxiety, increased performance, those sorts of things. And it's like, okay, those sound great, but then what is actually the mechanism? Why is that happening?
Yeah.
Right.
And then how do you make sure that's happening? Because just thinking black.
Right.
Is like,
right.
You can think like, oh, this is helping with so many things, but a lot of the time you might not see the direct cause, or maybe it's just placebo.
Right.
Like, you spend 5 minutes thinking black.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, wow, I'm focusing so much better.
Right. Right. Without this overly simplified notion that less thinking means less anxiety somehow, when it's like, I think there's a lot of different things that you could do there. There's a lot of like correlation that you could be drawing without understanding what's the root cause. So I think that for us, a lot of this is coming down to, there's a lot that does crowd our head, and that isn't just like our thoughts necessarily. We have so much stimulation coming from the digital devices and all the sorts of things that we're exposed to every day. And we have negative emotions, and we don't like our negative emotions, right? We want to reduce that, right? And so then you kind of have this different problem of and also, a lot of people can feel out of control of their mind, right? Out of control of their emotions.
Yeah.
And so there's all these different sorts of things that people are trying to solve with meditation. And I think that part of what I don't like about the way people frame it is that I think that coming to increased levels of clarity, decreased level of anxiety, and feeling more in control and one with yourself has to come from understanding what was the disconnect there in the first place. It has to come from increased understanding and thinking about, what is the underlying problem.
Yeah, because I think when you have a problem of like, oh my gosh, I'm getting frustrated here, I'm getting distracted here, like I feel like I'm just like all over the place, and I have no control over my mental state, and I don't have clarity, I think it can seem really satisfyingly simple when you come to the conclusion of, oh, meditation, just stop all these thoughts, just put the blame on the thoughts that are coming into your head, the negative thoughts of, like, I think in one of the most popular videos about meditation, it was like, well, let's say you're at the subway or something and someone steps on your foot, and then you start having thoughts, the evil little thoughts come in of like, oh my goodness, they didn't say sorry, what a mean person, and then all of a sudden you're feeling angry
because of your thoughts,
oh no, and what was going through my head was like, sometimes I'd feel angry, sometimes I might not. And it also isn't really the thoughts that cause the anger a lot of the time. It's the other way around. Which, so if you simplify this, I think it can make it hard to, like, actually, see the actual solution. Because I do think that's a simplified, understanding of meditation and where these negative emotions are coming from.
And that's what we talked about in our Inside Out podcast, was we were discussing, where do these emotions come from? Where do thoughts come from? And it ultimately comes through, our understanding, our identity, our goal function, our paradigm. Those are all the same thing, right? We have a certain prioritization structure that is also, predetermined by also our, like, mental model of the world. How do we understand things around us? And then from there, how do we understand ourselves? And how we understand ourselves has to come from an idea of, what do we care about? Where are we going, right? And then from there, that determines what do we pay attention to. I gave the example of, I'm not focused on the bookshelf because I'm not talking to the bookshelf, I'm talking to you, right? And you're what's prioritized in my mind and my field of vision and that sort of thing, right? And so the information that we prioritize is ultimately going to determine our emotions, because that's what we notice, right? That's the data that we're working with. And that's something that I think one thing that Sam Harris talked about when he was talking about meditation is understanding, like, is being able to see that your sense of self is an illusion. And I think it's kind of getting at what we're talking about here, in the sense that that sense of self, which is something that is made up in our minds, right? It's not what we actually are, right? It's just an idea of ourselves, which is extremely influential in what we think and what we feel, what we notice, right? But then at the same time, it's not just, oh, this is an illusion, we can totally discard it. I think that part of what is missing from this understanding is that we need to have thoughts, because we need to craft a narrative about ourselves and our lives. Right?
I think one thing our dad said that I found really funny a few years ago was, he was like, meditation's great and being thoughtful is great, and, like, being able to, and the idea of, like, a monk sitting on a hill just being all day, and, like, there are people that actually train themselves to not have any desires, and not be able to just do nothing, and literally they can, like, lower their heart rate, and it's like, yeah, it's cool. It's like, he gave an example of, like, a dude's that's like, wait, guys, try this. Just, like, be and do nothing and feel nothing. You can just do that. It's like, okay, that's great. But, like, you also have, like, things you want to do, and, like,
you have, like, a life.
The point of life is not to sit on a hill and do and be nothing. That's not the goal of life. I think. I mean, I have other goals than that.
And I think that part of it is, like, you want also meditation to be in service of those goals, right? And I think that
instead of just forget about everything, even food and water and everything, and just be until you die of starvation.
That's probably not the best strategy. But there's also this quote that's like, it goes something like, in order to control your life, you need to control your thoughts, right? Or something like that. And I think that part of the problem with controlling your thoughts is it's skipping over the mechanism of where your thoughts come from, right? Because if you're just trying to control your thoughts, that's a very conscious-oriented, contrived, extremely resource-heavy process of, like, I don't know, I'm thinking, and then oftentimes when people meditate,
about not thinking, and I'm thinking about not thinking about thinking.
Oftentimes when people are meditating, it goes into a process of, oh my God, stop thinking. Why am I thinking about this? Right? And then what that's doing is
trying to only think about black, but then I'm thinking about only thinking about black.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's not really the process of where are these thoughts coming from and how can I shape the natural mechanism of what do I perceive to be more in line with what I want to perceive, right?
Yeah.
Because there are all these sorts of distractions and thoughts that might not be very helpful and constructive. But in order for you to really help yourself in the long run without being so resource intensive in terms of focusing on what you're thinking about all the time, then you want to think about what is that mechanism and how you can shape it, because you can.
Yeah.
And the way to do it is not by controlling your thoughts. I think a lot of it is about
treating a symptom of the problem.
Exactly.
That's not treating the problem.
Yeah.
It's like if you were sick and then you were sneezing a bunch and you're
like, all these sneezes
all
are
these
not
sneezes
constructive.
are coming.
They're distracting.
They're distracting.
Try not to
me.
sneeze.
Try not to sneeze. Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's like you're having all of these problems, and if by putting the blame on the symptom of either sneezing or thinking, then you're not actually addressing the problem. So when you're trying to treat the symptom, whether it's sneezing or thinking, you're not actually treating the problem. So it's like with the example of like someone stepping on your foot, like sometimes I would get angry about that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm having more clarity in my mind and I'm actually like, and there isn't a problem, I won't get angry about that, you know? And you want to look at that difference, because that difference is the actual problem. It's where those thoughts are coming from, where those emotions are coming from.
Yeah.
If you're so touchy that you start fuming because someone stepped on your foot,
there's probably a bigger problem.
There's probably a bigger issue than just, oh my God, these pesky thoughts are coming into my brain and making me upset.
Yeah. And I think that part of it is that it's not necessarily that like trying to reduce your thoughts is bad. I think that abandoning your thoughts can be a good practice in the sense of like trying to abandon a narrative so that you can kind of try to perceive things outside of that narrative, because oftentimes we can get so caught up in a narrative that we aren't perceiving something outside of it to actually then improve the narrative. And I think that that's what meditation can really be good for, but I think that it can only really serve that purpose in a way that's maximally effective if you actually know the goal, right? Because if you know, oh, I'm trying to reduce my thoughts for this purpose, then that can be very productive. But if it's just stop thinking, then it's like that's not really helpful, right?
Yeah.
And I think that part of it is also understanding the dichotomy between the kind of the conscious mind and subconscious, and how our subconscious can communicate to us in a lot of different ways in terms of noticing things about your surroundings and things that you might not notice otherwise on a conscious perspective, because you can only pay attention to a limited amount at a time. But then there's also a part of your brain that is still running and perceiving a lot more than what you're aware of.
Yeah.
And I think that part of what meditation can do is basically giving you the space to block out these other sorts of things and the other sorts of distractions that are around you all the time, so that you can start to perceive yourself. And I think that can be really important, because there's a lot of ways in which our subconscious is trying to speak to us that gets completely muted and drowned out in today's world, especially because a lot of our environment is encouraging us to suppress ourselves. It's encouraging us to not pay attention to, like, hey, maybe I want to go move my body right now, but we have a 9-to-5 work schedule. Maybe I want to, take a day off because it's been a lot and I've been, a lot's been happening lately and I want to take some time to process, but we have vacation scheduled and we have work scheduled, and it's not something where we can really naturally be with ourselves.
It's kind of like forcing into a certain set structure, whereas the things your subconscious is telling you, it should be listened to.
Yeah.
And I think that using meditation as like something to help you with that versus like just trying to force yourself into another structure of don't think, don't do anything, is highly important, because we all have some kind of narrative in our heads about like everything,
because we need a way of thinking about things, and even words are just a mental model and are a simplified construct, right?
It's all just different labels and narratives, like the way we see everything. We can't see everything for just its objective truth. We need labels. That's a light.
But it's not a light.
But it's not a light.
Light is just a sound.
Yeah, that's just a sound.
Yeah.
And sound is just a sound.
Yeah.
So it's like, how are we supposed to deal with all this? We
Right.
need narratives. But the problem is when the narrative gets too far from reality,
Yeah.
we start going down a slippery
Or
slope.
when the narrative, when we know that something about our brain is feeding us things that we don't like. But
Yeah.
the thing is not to just dismiss it and try to override it. Like, why is it feeding something that you don't
Yeah,
like? Because
like-
that could be important.
Maybe
right?
you're watching the news every day and the constant like negative narratives are intruding on your mental health and your peace. You know, maybe that's a possibility. Meditation could definitely help with that. Of like, okay, I'm having a lot of negative thoughts right now. Let me just kind of like separate the thoughts, view my thoughts instead of just being consumed in them.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
But you also can't do that all day.
Yeah.
Like you can't spend your whole day trying to not think because there's so many things pressing in on you. Sometimes you have to get rid of the things that are pressing in on your mental health.
Yeah.
That are disrupting your peace.
And sometimes it's also like, you know, you want to make it so that a higher percentage of your thoughts are things that are constructive and are things that are helpful, right?
Yeah.
But the way that you do that is by shaping your perception. And so there's kind of two functions of meditation, I think, which is one, to try to perceive outside of your narrative, right? Because there are things outside of your narrative, which is one, can be coming from your subconscious. And that's a lot of where, you know, there's a lot more that we're perceiving at any given moment than what we're actually able to focus on and I guess consciously perceive, right? There's a lot more information that our brain is taking in. And that's something that I'll notice is that maybe I'll feel weird about a certain situation. And then I'll give myself time to think about it and just kind of sit with myself and think about why is this emotion happening, and I'll remember more about that situation than what I was really perceiving in the moment.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason why is because our brain is taking in a lot of information, and that is a million times more information than what we can actually consciously pay attention to and focus on. And so then sometimes when you're reflecting on a memory, you'll actually get more information than what you were getting in that moment, and that can give you insight as to, oh, that's why I was feeling weird about this sort of thing. And then maybe you want to think about, how do I address that? But it's not just, oh, I'm feeling weird, I don't like feeling weird, let me control my thoughts.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're totally missing out on what's the underlying problem here, what's actually driving this thought, driving this emotion, so that I can understand it, right? Because maybe it's not helpful. And sure, okay, then from there, then you want to think about, how do I make it so that I'm not having these thoughts and emotions? But maybe it is. And that's really important, and we shouldn't be missing out on that. And I think that the second mechanism is you can perceive outside of your narrative, which I think is really important to understand, and is kind of a very like abstract concept to think, I have a perception. There are ways that I think. There are things that I think. There are things that I see.
Yeah.
And it means certain things to me. And that is defined by my system of how I understand what is valuable. What do I care about? And that is a subjective process, right? It's not something that it's like, there is no meaning to the atoms of plastic in that dinosaur skull. But me personally, I know that I 3D printed that like 4 years ago, and that has a special sort of meaning to me because of what I know about it, right? But it's not just the objective reality of whatever it is in front of me.
Yeah.
And so we have all these different structures of value, and that's something that's extremely important, and something that we can't abandon because we need it in order to act. But at the same time, there is an intentional practice of even just being able to perceive your perception. And that's something you said in a previous podcast. That's like extremely hard thing to do, right?
Because you're also perceiving your perception
through your perception.
through your perception. Right. And even if you bring in a third person, they're perceiving your perception through their perception.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, how are you supposed to view yourself accurately?
Yeah, and it's even harder when you're talking to somebody else, because you're articulating your perspective through your perspective, which they're perceiving through their perspective, to try to give you insight on your perspective, right? Which is like, okay, this is very hard, and this is very complicated.
No wonder it's mind bending.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's very hard for people to try to define meditation and then actually articulate what is the goal here, right? Because one, you want to try to be able to perceive outside your perception, and while knowing knowing you can't do that, right? And then at the same time, it's things coming from your thoughts, your emotions, and digging deeper than that, while also thinking, like, what is it even that's, like, there's certain thoughts and emotions that I'm perceiving, but why am I perceiving that instead of something else?
Right.
And what are those other options? And are those options better? Are they worse? And why? And how can I reshape my narrative into something that's better and continuously grow upon my paradigm and awareness? Because one thing is that it's not just a qualitative difference. There are ways in which you can completely expand your awareness by having better mental models of the world that then allow you to perceive more. And the reason why is because there's certain things where, like, I can be more aware of the people in a place that I'm already familiar with, right? If I'm already familiar with the surroundings, then I'm not paying attention to my surroundings as much, and I can pay more attention to the person in front of me.
Yeah.
Right? And so then if you have mental models understanding aspects of the world, then you don't have to pay as much attention to them. Right? And then you can start to notice new things. And so I think that a lot of the potential with meditation is that as humans, we are extremely bad at understanding that we have a perception and that it's limited, because we see everything through our perception. And so we think, oh, this is reality because it's what's in front of us. Right? And I think that meditation is the practice of trying to abandon those narratives so that, one, we can perceive ourselves, and then so that we can try to perceive the world and have a better understanding of it.
But if you understand that that's the goal, and you're actually trying to work towards that, then it's a lot easier. Then you can actually, like, then it's easier to actually do meditation productively. Because, like, I personally never spent, like, longer than, like, a week doing meditation consistently, because I knew theoretically there were a lot of benefits. Theoretically.
Right.
But then I was like, okay, I'm not seeing the direct causes here, so I just lost motivation. If it's just trying to stop your thoughts, which can be extremely hard to do because you can be thinking about something.
Right.
Then, and there are different, like, layers to it. Sometimes you're not even aware of certain thoughts.
Yeah.
Then if you're not just trying to do that, and you're actually trying to go at it with a purpose of, like, viewing yourself with an unbiased perspective, that not only is easier, but is also a lot more helpful.
I think part of it is just to control your life. You need to be able to understand yourself. And there are things about yourself that you don't even perceive. And that's a scary thought. But I think that what meditation allows us to do is give us the space away from all the distractions in our life to perceive ourselves.